So hello everybody, I'm back. A student said that the chapter 6 bond slides, the audio I made, the video, audio and video, did not match the slides in the chapter. So I'll make another one right here. Alright, we're going to talk about bonds. And the first thing we got to talk about is that the term interest rate is what you usually hear when you talk about debt, right? Such as bank loans or bonds, right? Compensation, right, paid by the borrower of funds. When you go to the bank, they tell you what the interest rate is, the APR or the APY, right? And then you hear the term required return, and this is, applied to common stock, right? Which is the cost of funds when you obtain, which you obtain by selling an ownership interest. So let me get the pen here. So this is we still got the box up. All right, interest rate, right? Applied to debt. And let me change this here. I'll go to line. And you got required return. Usually applied to equity instruments such as common stock. All right. So we have that. All right, so basically, interest rates are tied to the money supply, which they don't really tell you here. But inflation is basically a rising trend in the prices of most goods and services, and as you are aware, inflation is going up a little bit. So the Fed is trying to tame it. And how is the Fed trying to tame it? By increasing interest rates, right? Which lets companies not borrow as much, and they try to slow down the overheating economy. All right, risk, we all know the word risk, right? Risk leads investors to expect a higher return on their investment. And you remember this saying, you should never forget this saying. The higher the risk, the greater the return. That's all you have to know. All right, and this term liquidity preference refers to investors who will prefer short-term equities because they could sell them and eventually reinvest them, and they're afraid of the risk of going long-term. All right, so this was during the crisis of 2008, how interest rates went negative. And basically what happened was investors paid more to the Treasury than the Treasury promised to pay back, but that was still a saving grace. Okay, so the real rate of interest is the rate that creates equilibrium between the supply of savings and the demand for investment funds in a perfect world. So I believe that they have the equation here. And the real rate of interest, as I said, will change with economic conditions and with the money supply. So here is the money supply, right? And as you can see, as the supply goes down on the demand curve, the real rate of interest here will drop, right? And as you go from S0 to S1, and if you went from S1 to S0, you can see the supply going up, right? The money supply. So you'll see the real rate of interest over here going up. All right, so the nominal rate of interest is what you normally get when you go to the bank, right? You get this nominal rate. And the nominal rate is part of an equation, a simple math equation of interest rates. And the nominal rate is different, and I want to make a point of that from the real rate because of two factors. Number one is inflation, which everyone should know. Inflation is not your friend, right? And basically, depending on the type of bond you take or the type of financial instrument, how much risk you're taking, okay? So the more risk you're going to take, as I said, the higher the rate. So if you're going to invest in junk bonds, you may want to make sure you get a nice high interest rate. All right, so here's that equation I was talking about. And here's even though it says R1, this is the nominal rate, okay? See the nominal rate of interest for security 1. They give it a number, security 1. So basically, let me highlight this here because this is important. This is important stuff. And I'll make a box. So this equation is important. The nominal rate is equal to the risk of the real rate plus the inflation premium plus the risk premium, like on a bond. This equation actually goes longer. There's market premium, and you'll see it in a lot of books with about 6 or 7 terms. But suffice it to say that these 2 terms here are called the risk-free rate that you would get on Treasury securities, and then is the risk premium. So they take this equation and simplify it. So if I could pull it down a little bit, and here you see the risk-free rate, which is that sum, goes over to here, right? See that risk-free? And here is the risk premium. All right, so you should know that. It's simple math, simple math. So here's that equation again. And here they just simply show the risk-free rate. They take away the risk premium. And this is what you would get on Treasury bills. So this is an important statement. I think I'll highlight this for you. So you can see the inflation premium is driven by investors' expectations about inflation, and also the money supply will affect that too. All right, so here's a personal finance example showing you the effects of inflation, and you could clearly see here that the inflation was, I believe, what, 4%, and she's getting 7%, so she's getting more than the inflation. So you can see she has a 3. If you subtract these, she'll simply have a 3% increase in buying power. So instead of buying, how many pieces of candy was she buying? She was going to buy 40 pieces of candy, but she's able to buy 41.2 pieces of candy. So it just goes to show you how inflation affects you. All right, I want to jump ahead. So here's inflation, and here's the Treasury bill rate. You can see how they track, right? So Treasury bill rate goes up, inflation goes up, all right? And you know the T-bill rate lags a little bit. 1981-82 was a tough year. All right, so here's the Treasury yield curve. Here's the normal one. The shorter the term, the lower the interest for obvious reasons, because you're taking, and then the longer the term, you're taking more risk, right? So this is a yield curve. The normal yield curve. Here's a flat yield curve that happened in 1989, and there was a big recession in 1981, so the yield curve inverted. All right, so there's a bunch of theories of the term structure, which I'm not going to cover too much. I want to get to the bond equation. I'm going to jump ahead. Oh, so we should look at the risk premiums though. Here is a U.S. Treasury bond risk-free rate 3.18, and here's bonds. You can see for junk bonds right here. They call these speculative bonds junk bonds. This is a junk bond. So you can see that the extra premium you would get on the interest over the risk-free rate. And again, here's the junk bonds, right? If you subtract off the risk-free rate, here's the premium, 2.28%, right? Simply by subtracting that from that. All right, so there's a bunch of terms here, different risk premium components, default risk. These are the other terms I said should have been included in that equation. Okay, so a corporate bond is a long-term debt instrument, right? You're loaning the company your money. You can't vote. You're just loaning them the money, and they're going to give you a coupon, let's say every 6 months. And by definition, we should know this very carefully. Please, when you watch this, the bond's par value is typically $1,000. All right, and you'll get a coupon interest on that $1,000 every 6 months. See, semi-annual. Semi-annual is every 6 months. So remember, par value or face value is normally $1,000. All right, so the indenture is the document that explains all the legalities in your bond, how much extra debt they can take, and everything you got to know, all the covenants, the debt provisions, right? So the indenture is the document, the legal document, and these are the rules, both of these here, that you will find in the indenture. So here's a couple of examples of different covenants, right? That certain companies can't, things companies can't do as a covenant while they're they're borrowing your money. You notice they can't have any additional cash dividends, right? All right. So I'm about 12 minutes into this, and I'll make another one tomorrow. We'll get to the real bond equation. All right. So everyone have a good night. We'll pick up here, okay? The reason I don't make these too big is it takes forever to upload them or download them, and you may not want to watch this for a half hour. So there's a problem. So it's best if we do it in snippets. All right, good night.